History lovers of Reddit. Who's the coolest person in history no one has ever heard of? The nameless berserker of Stamford Bridge. He held off an entire English army alone on a small bridge. With just his big Dane axe. No arrow could bring him down. Only later did someone poke him from underneath the bridge into his balls. He instantly went to Valhalla. Not unknown but seems to be far less commonly known is Subutai. The main general under Genghis Khan and his son Ogtai, was a brilliant strategist that could coordinate armies separated by hundreds of miles. He also conquered more territory than any other military commander in history. Read this sentence. Roman von Ungern-Sternberg was an Austrian-born Russian anti-Bolshevik lieutenant general in the Russian Civil War and then an independent warlord whose Asiatic Cavalry Division wrested control of Mongolia from the Republic of China in 1921 after its occupation. When I read his biography I had to keep fact-checking because honestly, this guy's life seems utterly unbelievable. He formed his own Mongol horde in goddamn 1921. He was obviously an irredeemable asshole. But what a wild life. Julie Daubigny, basically think Arya Stark but real. French, and a highly promiscuous bisexual. She was a singer by profession but hired a master swordsman to teach her how to fence, and quickly became ridiculously good at it. She and this instructor got into a fight with some French nobleman and she challenged him to a duel. Won it. But then had to flee the gendarmerie because dueling was technically illegal by the 17th century in France. She dressed up in disguise a lot of the time, including frequently in men's clothing, and as a result was challenged several times to other duels by obnoxious French noblemen who took exception to her dress sense. She killed them all. She then became a famous socialite and caused a scandal by kissing a woman at a ball, again, while wearing men's clothing, and was challenged to 3 separate duels by yet more obnoxious French noblemen who didn't like her snagging some hot chick right in front of them, despite the fact that she was by this time one of the most famously skilled fencers in Europe. She killed them all too. Obviously, this amused the French king so much that he just pardoned her of all crimes because literally, he was so entertained by her outrageous awesomeness. During this time she had somehow managed to procure a position as a singer at the Paris Opera House, despite being technically under a sentence of death for illegally dueling multiple people until she pardoned 4. As mentioned, killing yet more people, and shagged her way around the male and female members of the opera. At one point a visiting conductor was treating the women there badly, so she just rolled up her sleeves and beat the shit out of him. The eventual love of her life was a French countess. But this countess died young, leaving her inconsolable, and she herself then died, possibly by suicide. Having done all of this by the age of 33. If I were Alexandre Dumas I'd sit there and think, well, I had this idea for a novel, but this is probably just a bit too unbelievable even for me. I'm not sure it's the coolest, but I went a surprising amount of time without hearing about Saint Maximilian Kolbe. And I honestly believe he should be a household name. He was a Polish Catholic priest who was arrested and sent to Auschwitz after publishing anti-Nazi publications. When a prisoner in Auschwitz escaped, it was common punishment to kill 10 people in his place. And on this day it was decided that 10 would be murdered in starvation chambers. One person chosen at random cried out for mercy, and Maximilian took his place. As the 10 lay in the starvation chamber he led them in prayer and despite 2 weeks without food or water, stood up and looked at the Nazi guards calmly every time they entered to remove the dead. Running out of patience, the Nazi guards eventually killed him by lethal injection. He's a national hero in Poland, but his is a name I'd really like known world over. Zenobia, Queen of the Palmyrene Empire. She was a warrior and well-educated, fluent in several languages. After her husband was murdered, she became regent of her son. She seized control of territories in the east, conquered Egypt, and built a powerful empire. Later, she was captured after a Roman siege and executed. She is known as a heroic queen and a freedom fighter who inspired Catherine the Great. Tycho Brahe. At least I assume nobody knows who he is because if they did, he'd be one of the most beloved men in history. You ever meet a college frat bro that was inexplicably brilliant despite being, well, a total frat bro? A rare genius who would spend his weekends chugging beer and eating ass, only to go to class on Monday and set the curve for the test he didn't study for? Tycho Brahe is the patron saint of such unicorns. Tycho Brahe was one of the most brilliant astronomers of the early Renaissance. His data, far more accurate than that of his contemporaries, set the stage for men like Johannes Kepler and Galileo Galilei to decode the secrets of kinematics. He painted the most accurate representation of the solar system that the world had ever seen, and was the giant upon whom Isaac Newton stood. But he was also a total fucking party animal. He would throw huge rages and invite royalty and nobility, and bring his pet moose along and get it wasted. That's right, a full-grown fucking moose. He lost his nose in a duel and got it replaced with one made of gold just to flex on every hater in the world. He died when his bladder exploded because he was partying too hard and didn't want to leave to use the bathroom. Every time a college student shows up to their midterm hungover and crushes it anyway, the ghost of Tycho Brahe is smiling down on them. Vera Atkins was a spy for the Allies and worked with the man who is said to have inspired the character of James Bond. One of her specialties was improvising weapons on the fly. Her exploits are chronicled in a really excellent book called Spy Mistress. Mary Elizabeth Bowser. She was a spy in the Confederate White House, working as a servant, and leaked a bunch of stuff to the Union. Jefferson Davis knew there was a spy, but never suspected her because she was black. Edit, typo. An unknown Soviet tank crew that held an entire German division back for a day in the Battle of Raseiniai in 1941. From Between Giants, the battle for the Baltics in World War II. Greater than a KV-1 or KV-2 tank, accounts vary, advanced far behind the German lines after attacking a column of German trucks. The tank stopped on a road across soft ground and was engaged by 4 50mm anti-tank guns of the 6th Panzer Division Anti-Tank Battalion. The tank was hit several times but fired back, disabling all 4 guns. A heavy 88mm gun of the Divisional Anti-Aircraft Battalion was moved about 730 meters, 800 yards, behind the tank but was knocked out by the tank before it could score a hit. During the night, German combat engineers tried to destroy the tank with satchel charges but failed despite possibly damaging the tracks. Early on the morning of the 25th of June, German tanks fired on the KV from the woodland while an 88mm gun fired at the tank from its rear. Of several shots fired, only 2 penetrated the tank. German infantry advanced and the KV opening machine gun fire against them and the tank was knocked out by grenades thrown into the hatches. According to some accounts, the crew was buried by the German soldiers with full military honors. In other accounts, the crew escaped during the night. Miyamoto Musashi by far. He was a samurai from I believe from feudal Japan. Basically this guy was every weeb fantasy. He never lost a fight and dual wielded a katana and wakizashi. After a while he was so good he thought the swords were too easy and switched to using a bokken, wooden sword, and still never lost. The dude was a badass. Monaham is fairly unknown outside of Finland. He was the Tsar's bodyguard and one of the first Europeans to meet Dalai Lama. Escaped Russia during the revolution and came to Finland to lead the Whites in Finnish Civil War. Later lead the Finnish army in Winter War and Continuation War, giving the Red Army a good fight and then became Finland's 6th president. The highest military award you can earn in Finland is named after him as well. Sybil Ludington. At 16 years old, she volunteered to ride over 40 miles by horseback in the middle of the night to warn the revolutionaries that the British were coming. It was originally suggested that her older brother make the trip, but she volunteered, claiming the British forces were a lot less likely to stop a young girl on the road. By the time the British troops arrived, about 400 of them, the town had been evacuated. Thanks to Sybil, she rode farther than Paul Revere, and is often referred to as the female Paul Revere, even though she gets almost no historical credit. According to Wikipedia, prior to her famous ride, Sybil saved her father from capture, when a royalist named Ichabod Prosser tried, with 50 other royalists, to capture her father. Sybil lit candles around the house and organized her siblings to march in front of the windows in military fashion, creating the impression of many troops guarding the house. The royalist and his men fled. So yeah, pretty badass for a 16-year-old girl in the 1700s.